everyone, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another Deck Doctor video. Today, we're putting it all on the line. And by all, I mean my marriage. Today, we're going to be looking at my wife's commander deck. Today, we're going to be looking at a Kynaios and Tiro of Meletis commander deck that my wife's had together for a fair number of years now. A couple of important bits before we jump into the Deck Doctor. Firstly, thank you very much to the wife for letting me do this to her baby, to her favourite commander deck. Also worth shouting out the fact that wifey has her own YouTube channel. Check out the Legacy Gambit if you like legacy content. My wife Sahar hosts it with her co-host Sarah. They're super cool. They're both super engaging. Link will be down in the description below. Check them out. They're awesome. Secondly, if you have a deck you would like me to doctor, put it down in the comments. There's no guarantees I'll make a full video on it, but I do like making these, so put it down in the comments and any notes that you might have of things you want to improve. Right, so as we mentioned, this is a Kynaios and Tiro of Meletis commander deck. Let's quickly read what that does. So Kynaios and Tiro of Meletis, I'm definitely saying that wrong every time. It is a 2/8 legendary creature human soldier. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card. Each player may put a land card from his or her hand onto the battlefield, and each opponent who didn't, draw a card. So this can be built a couple of ways. I know the way my wife has built it is between the two of them, so it can either be like a group huggy style of deck where you're giving everyone card draw, you're giving everyone lands, you end up with more of those and you're just going to go over the top in value and kill people with just a bigger board state than them. The second way you can build this is more of a lands kind of deck because this basically does let you put an extra land into play every turn. So the first thing I'm going to do is go through the deck and see what we like, see what we don't like, make some notes, see what can be cut. So I've split it up into our different sections. We have our ramp, we have our card draw, we have some recursion, we have some extra land spells, we have a big bunch of lands here, we have our interaction section, we have a lands value package, we have some land win cons, and then we have some more generic win cons in the deck, along with a little bit of protection. Let's kind of go through some of this stuff now. So first of all, with our ramp, we have things like Cultivate, we have Kadama's Reach, we have Rampant Growth, we have Secure a Tri-Builder. These are all very good. In our land section, we have things like Evolving Wilds, we have Myriad Landscape. These all get basic lands. Wifey's being a bit ballsy here. We only have 7 basic lands. I think we have more ways of finding non-basic lands than we have basic lands in the deck. That's probably something we're going to look at when we're recommending cuts and changes to the deck. Also, for a lands deck, we are very light, and by that I mean I don't think we have any utility lands. Every land in here generates us mana. Nothing really does anything cool by itself. Like, I guess, like, yeah, Forbidden Orchard makes our opponent a blocker. So that kind of plays into the group huggy thing, I guess, but like everything else in the deck is just a straight mana land. So I think we can definitely look at some things there. Also, going down and looking at the curve of the deck, curve here, you see it's a little bit chunky. It is a lands adjacency deck, so it does do a lot of rampings, but I do think we can bring this down a little bit just to make it easier to cast all of our spells. So doing some more overview of the deck, some other things that stick out to me, we have this extra land section here. These are just extra ways of putting extra lands from our hand into play. So we have Azusa, we have Burgeoning, we have Kadama of the Eastery, which does work with lands, it's very cool. We have Mina and Dent, and we have Rites of Flourishing. Rites of Flourishing definitely feels like a crossover card between the group huggy element and the extra lands a turn style of deck that this is. So we have ways of playing extra lands. We have cards that give us additional value when we play extra lands. So we have Courser of Crewfix, we have Tireless Provisioner, we have Tireless Tracker, we have Valakut Exploration. These are all cards that reward us when we play extra lands. We have some of these in our card draw section as well, like we have Tetiova, Benthic Druid, and we also have Horn of Greed as a way of rewarding us when we play a land. We then even have its own dedicated win condition section just for lands. So obviously you have things like Avenger of Zendikar, makes us a bunch of tokens equal to the number of lands we control. We have Nissa, Steward of Elements, which I think goes here. Basically this gives us a bit of card advantage and then can make 2 lands 5/5 elemental, so it's kind of turning lands into win conditions. We have Omnath, Locus of Rage, which has like landfall, make 5/5s, that's really good. Rampaging Balos is another one that we put a land into play, make a big creature. We have Scoot Swarm that's kind of busted. Once you get to 6 or more lands with this in play, you start making copies of Scoot Swarm, so then it starts doubling and quadrupling very, very quickly and really takes over a game. We also have Phylath, World Sculptor, which is like the Avenger of Zendikar at home. I'll be honest, I've not really been super impressed with this card. It's fine, it just doesn't do enough compared to the original. Then also for the land side, we obviously have our ramp section. So we have our ramp and growth effects that get basic lands that we've already mentioned, things like our Cultivate, our Kadama's Reach, combined with things that can get dual lands like Farseek, Nature's Law, 3 visits. That's all very good. So that's kind of the lands half of the deck. The other part of it is more the group huggy style of thing. So that's what kind of, I guess, where Veteran Explorer comes in. That's where introducing things like the Monarch comes into the game. That's where things like Howling Mine and Temple Bell also kind of come to the fore a little bit. Also, obviously, Rites of Flourishing, that's a very group huggy style of deck. The thing is, the other win conditions we have don't really play into this that well. So some other win cons we have things like Aurelia the War Leader, we have Gisela Blade of Gold Knight. These are very cool cards, but they don't really scream like group hug to me. They scream make a big board state, hit your opponents with them, which I love, and I know my wife does too, so that's probably something we're going to be keeping later on. Going back to the ramp sec, there are some things I'm not a massive fan of. Like Veteran Explorer is fine. Like, if we had more basics, I would like it a bit more. In a deck where we have all these landfall cards, I'm not a big fan of things like Darksteel Ignite, Thought Vessel even. Smothering Tithe is fine. It's not really going to make people like you, which I don't think works in a group huggy style of deck, but it is just a good card. I'm kind of fine with Chromatic Lantern. I know 3 mana ramp isn't really where you want to be on an artifact anymore, but this is a 4-color deck and it just fixes our mana perfectly, so quality of life is definitely something to consider with this card. Looking at the recursion, I'm fine with Nissa Vital Force. It's a fine landsy matters card that also lets you bring a permanent back from your graveyard to your hand. That's fine. Sun Titan is just cool. It can bring back fetch lands. It can bring back like things like Azusa if they get killed. I'm fine with Sun Titan in this deck. I think that's quite cool. The interaction section, I think, can just generally be improved a little bit. I'm assuming a lot of this is just cards that we have opened over the years and kind of... My wife's had this deck together for quite a long time, so we can just do some fine-tuning with this, with like upgrading things like Krosan Grip, Hour of Devastation. We can upgrade Ablation. We can upgrade things like Return to Dust. These are all cards that kind of... There's been more power grip versions that we can just look to kind of tune up a little bit. With protection, I'm kind of fine with these options in here, but it is a little boring to just recommend put Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots in every deck. So something like Selfless Swire is kind of cool. So is Archon of Coronation. We have a lot of ramp in this deck. This is a cool card, why not run it? So the plan for the changes, for me, I think is to focus this a little bit more, make it a bit more about the lands package, because I also know that's kind of what my wife likes to play. Like she did play Scapeshift in Modern for quite a while. Therefore, as a land style of deck, that kind of Scapeshifty package, I think, is something that she would like, and also is something that would fit quite nicely into this deck. Like, I'm still going to keep cards like Horn of Greed, because it is a kind of group huggy style of mechanic, but we get more use out of it. Same with cards like Rites of Flourishing. Yes, it helps everyone, but it helps us even more because we're the lands deck. Some other things we'll also do is probably focus on cutting some of these just more generic-y win cons and focus them more on win cons with things that care about land. So this section will get bigger, this section will get a little bit smaller. Also, when making cuts from a raw numbers point of view, things like 13 ramp is a little bit high. Things like 10 bits of interaction, a little bit high. We'll probably cut 1 or 2 off of those numbers just to make room for some other things that we're looking to add in the deck. Right, so I've gone ahead and made my changes. What I'm going to do now is load up the comparison to see what has actually come out. So in terms of cuts, some of these should be pretty obvious. So I've cut things like Vidalcan Orrery, Venus' Journal. These are in our win con sections. These are kind of just like generic cards that kind of like, yes, they're good, but we can run some more specific ones that'll just be more impactful. We've cut some of the ramp that cares about basic lands. I have added some basic lands to the deck, but by cutting the worst ones for the deck, I think, again, it just makes everything a little bit tuned. Like, yes, Veteran Explorer can ramp us 2 lands ahead, but we have no way of sacrificing it reliably in this deck. Same with Rampant Growth. Like, I would much rather run a card like Cultivate than Rampant Growth. Because we are running cards that give us extra land drops in a turn, we just want to have more cards in hand. So therefore, Rampant Growth is not as good as a card like Cultivate in a specific landfall-y style of deck. A lot of these cuts were in like the win con section, things like Chasm Skulker, things like Samut, Voice of Dissent, Nissa Steward of Elements. I think we just do better. Same with Vicious Shadows. I love this card, but I think we can kind of get more synergistic options that work with the deck in there. We also cut some of the interaction. Again, I think we can just get some better bits in there. So things like Krosan Grip, Return to Dusk, I think we can do a bit better on. So we made 30 cuts, and we added 30 cards in. So the first thing we did was added some basic lands to the deck. So we added 1 island, 2 mountains, 3 forests, just to kind of make the mana base a little bit better, just to make spells that we have that go and get lands do a bit extra work. While we're talking about the mana base, I also added some Triumphs in here. They're just really, really good. This is a 4-color deck. I know they're pricey, but they just do so much work. They're going to be important. So we added a couple of Triumphs into here as well. The other thing with the lands is I added all of the green bounce lands that we could run. These are really good with landfall effects and cards that let you play multiple lands in a turn. If you have 3 land drops in a turn, you can just play the Simic Growth Chamber 3 times, get a load of Avenger of Zendikar triggers, and you're good to go. So they're very powerful. I do actually really like those in the deck. To help boost them up a little bit, we're also running a card like Spelunking and Tiller Engine. These make lands that come into play tapped untapped. They untap them, meaning that we can use our bounce lands for the extra mana straight away, while also bouncing them back to our hand. It's a little bit busted. It's actually very cool. Talking of landfall stuff, we've added AEC, Tyrant of Gaia Strait, for some extra card draw. This is basically another bigger Tatiova that also lets us play an extra land in a turn. We've added Lotus Cobra, again, just makes so much ramp in a deck that's playing multiple lands a turn. And we've also added Field of the Dead as just another token maker for this deck. Again, we're focusing the deck on winning by us playing multiple lands in a turn. To help that out, I've also added Ramonek Excavator and Conduit of Worlds. These are both cards that let us play lands from our graveyard. This deck already had some fetch lands. These will work great with them. It's just extra ways of us playing multiple lands a turn. As we've said, we want that. IEC gives us extra land drops, but so does Wayward Swordtooth, another fantastic card in this deck. Really dropped in price recently, which I'm very happy to see. And also Dryad of the Listen Grove, which also does something else important, because this is going to support the Scapeshift package that we've added. So Dryad of the Listen Grove and also Prismatic Omen make all of our lands every land type. So at a base level, they fix us for all of our colors. That's already pretty cool. But importantly, they make all of our lands mountains, so that if we have Valakut the Molten Pinnacle in play, we can start Lightning Bolt all of our opponents whenever a land comes into play under our control. This is specifically something I know my wife will really like, so it's something I had to add. To help find our Valakut, we've obviously gone and put Crop Rotation in. It replaces a land in play for the best land that we want in our deck. We've also obviously added Scapeshift with this. Now, Scapeshift is a very busted card. 2 green, sacrifice any number of lands, search your library for that many land cards, put them into play tapped, then shuffle. At a base level, this will just trigger landfall an obscene amount of times equal to the number of lands that we have in play. We basically just sack 10 lands to Scapeshift, put 10 lands into play, get 10 full landfall triggers on all of our stuff. But because this is also importantly a tutor, we can go and get cards like Field of the Dead. We can go and get cards like Valakut the Molten Pinnacle. We can go and get these cards to help us win the game. That's all pretty awesome. I should also mention one other landfall card that we put in, and that's Omnath Locus of Creation. We're a 4-color deck that cares about lands. We probably should be running Omnath Locus of Creation. It gains us life, it makes us mana, it deals each opponent 4. That's all pretty good. And then lastly, we buffed up the interaction section a little bit by adding cards like Path to Exile, because it's just cheaper and more efficient, and Beast Within, which just hits a wider array of things. Here's a look at the actual deck doctored list. You'll see I've kept things like Protection the same. I've actually gone up in card draw by adding IEC, not really touching much else. We've come down a little bit in ramp, just by cutting some of the worst bits of ramp in here. We have 10 very solid bits on top of our card draw and the things that let us play extra lands. That is all ramp as well when you think about it. We've gone down 2 bits of interaction, but we've added more efficient bits in here, which has meant we can go up a land to 38, which I think I like a little bit more in this deck, and gives us access to just more basics, which will be important. And then going down to our win con section, you can see that one of the biggest changes is that we have gone from a bunch of just generic win cons to way more land matter based win cons in here. So we still have our token makers, but now we have like the Scapeshift package in here. We have like the Spelunking Tiller Engine package, just make us an obscene amount of mana with those bounce lands. I'll be honest, I have kept both Aurelia and Gisela in here because those were both originally commanders of this deck. There is an element of history with this deck that is important. And also, Gisela still wins games in 2024. We can easily ramp it out in this deck. We'll just kill people with it. Then lastly, down the bottom, you'll see the curve of the deck is a little bit nicer as well. I'll put both of them on screen here so you can compare them. We've definitely got more 3-drops now. We have more cheaper spells, we have more card draw, we're just going to be doing more things, we're going to be having more fun while playing Commander, and also we have a higher upside in the deck with cards like Scapeshift. These lead to some really big, dumb, busted turns that previously we just didn't have. We have definitely cut some of the group huggy elements of the deck, but I feel we've kept ones that still work with what the deck is trying to do, like especially in the card draw. Like I'm fine with a Temple Bell in this deck, because it's just ways of us drawing extra lands that we can use to trigger all of our things. Alright, so that's going to do it for the video. As I said, if you have any decks you would like me to take a look at, put it down in the comments. Again, no guarantees, but I do like doing this, so hopefully I can do more of these in the future. Also importantly, thank you to my wife and thank you to the Legacy Gambit for giving me this deck to have a look at. Go check them out. Again, they're both awesome. If you like Legacy, if you like Eternal content, they are fantastic. Highly recommend them. They're engaging and you can really tell that they love what they're doing. But that's going to do it from me. Until next time, please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.